You've been talking about the 2.5% of GDP you want spent on defence at some future point. There's some puzzlement back home about how, if you're going to have a review and then work out the date you're going to hit it, and yet you're going to have a spending review before that. So you're going to decide the envelope, and yet somehow you're going to stretch the envelope a bit later. It doesn't quite tally.
The commitment to 2.5% is absolute, and we will get to that 2.5%. It is very important. We need to do that within our fiscal rules. I think that actually underscores the seriousness of what we're doing. If I was to sit here and say to you, we're going to hit 2.5%, I'm going to pick an arbitrary date, I'm not going to tell you how we're going to afford it, you would say that's an unserious plan.
But it seems unserious if you're going into a spending review and deciding the entire cash envelope and you haven't worked out when you're intending to hit the 2.5. There won't be enough money for defence, or you have to scrape it out of something else you don't want to scrape it out of.
We'll meet it within our fiscal rules. Obviously, we will go through that exercise. There is the strategic review as well, which is looking at the risks and the capabilities.
But they're out of kilter, these two things.
We've now got access to material that we understandably and rightly didn't have access to before we were in government. So we carry out that strategic review. The commitment to 2.5% is the commitment. It's the commitment that we have made as a government, that I have made, but we need a clear pathway to it, and that is what you would expect from a serious government.
You get my point. These things are not tied up properly. But can I ask you about, you say you're now getting to seriously see the books and that sort of thing. We heard Rachel Reeves on Monday. Some people would say sort of pearl-clutching horror at what the books looked like. But through the general election, we could all hear the Institute for Fiscal Studies, almost any economist you talk to, saying what the problem was with the books. You've got the OBR telling you on a regular basis what the books look like. There's something sort of performative, slightly contrived about this, because that's what it looks like to people.
Well, let me absolutely meet that head on. If you take one issue that's come up urgently, that's prisons, then I'm afraid what we found is much worse than what I was expecting. I'm deeply familiar.
Right? I mean, yet again.
I can tell you it's right.
The Prison Governors Association just put out a statement saying they told you what it was like. No, you had loads of talks beforehand. You knew it was bad.
It's far worse. It is shocking. Obviously, I know this field pretty well, but it is a basic function of government to make sure that we have the prison places we need for those people who are being sent to prison by our courts. For that to have broken down is a catastrophic failure of the last government. It is a very high level of recklessness and irresponsibility. And I would say this is not, a party political issue. It's a basic function of government, and it's worse than we thought it would be.
You've appointed James Timpson as Prisons Minister. And that makes people think, yet again, there was stuff that you were saying in the election about clamping down and on crime and all the rest of it. You were doing the familiar rhetoric, the tough talk. But James Timpson is someone who believes that about a third of the people, particularly women, who are in prison shouldn't be there. There should be much more community sentencing, a sort of whole rethink of prisons, which you didn't talk about in the election. You just talked about building more prisons. Is that actually where you are? Are you much closer to James Timpson's thinking?
I spent 5 years of my life as the chief prosecutor, bringing cases which led to serious criminals going to prison for very long periods of time. I'm asking
about the others, though. Yeah.
In relation to the work that could be done to prevent people going to prison, I've always believed that there are cases which didn't need to have got to court.
So we do have...
And so, I mean, if you look at some of the stuff we're saying in the election about knife crime and tackling crime that's particularly prevalent among young people, we want youth hubs, which are an opportunity to pull young people out of
absolutely, and that was in the manifesto. But what wasn't in the manifesto was a lot more community sentencing, many fewer people going into prisons. It sounded like you were going to send more to prison. You wanted to build more prisons. Is it actually that you think there are far too many people who get prison sentences who shouldn't get them, maybe particularly women?
Well, we're not conducting a review of sentencing. We're dealing with an immediate problem. Well, we're dealing with
an immediate problem. So what's James Timpson doing there? He's got all these beliefs.
We're dealing with an immediate problem, which is that we've got too many prisoners for the prison places that we've got. That is a complete failure of the last government. We need to address that.
I'm being told my time is up. No rethink on sentencing.
Well, look, we will look at sentencing in the round, but the problem I'm addressing this week is not sentencing
Sounds like
policy.
There might be a rethink there.
Well, look, I'm not addressing the question of sentencing policy. I'm addressing something much more basic, which is that this government has left a complete mess when it comes to prisons. And we are going to have to pick that up. We're going to have to fix it, and yes, then we're going to have to look at what the long-term fix of that is. But the immediate problem they've left us is a very serious problem of too many prisoners for the number of prison places. And I can't build a prison overnight, as is obvious.
Prime Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you.